Woohoo! Welcome to our 25th episode of Yarwood Martial Arts Mat Chat with Mr. Yarwood and Coach Les. We are here talking about what I would call that big, important connection between the benefits and lifestyle support from martial arts proficiencies. And today we're kind of stepping into what I would call the common sense business life world and bringing it back and demonstrating where it shows up in the martial world. So we're going a little bit opposite the way we normally do. And we're going to be talking about nonverbal communication in personal and professional life. First off, nonverbal communication is a vital aspect of human interaction, often conveying more meaning than words. Somewhere between 90 and 95% of our communication is nonverbal. 90 to 95%. Think about that.
How do they measure that?
How do they measure that? That is for the scientists and all those people that go to university and get degrees.
There's some kind of communication gauge.
Yes. They have spent more time and research than I would care to spend. I'm just going to repeat their data. So, Mr. Yarwood, tell us a little bit about why this is important to you and where would you like to start today?
So, obviously, everything we do is communication one way or another. We're sending a message to people. We're receiving messages from people. How we act, how we talk, how we look, how we emote, everything that we do is communication of some kind or other. And I just think it's important for people to understand the importance of nonverbal communication and what messages it can send to people without you even probably realizing what you're saying. Some people perceive things differently than what you think you're saying. Like, I think one of the biggest ones is this, crossing your arms, right? I've heard many definitions of what that means. Or it can mean that you're closed off to what it is that you're speaking to with the person. You don't want to hear what they have to say. Maybe you're bored. I've heard maybe even it's just you're showing some interest in what they're trying to say. So I've heard many different reasons for it. When there is in my former organization, there was one of our chief instructors. We were at an instructor training, by the way, and there's probably about 400 of us in this giant arena room training. And he was talking, and he had us in 4 separate groups. And I was kind of standing on the edge of my group towards the front listening to him, and he was kind of in the middle, just kind of interacting with everybody. And all of a sudden he turns and he starts walking towards me, and he goes, "Do you want to fight?" And I'm just like, "What? What are you talking about?" I thought he's talking to me. He walked past me. The guy directly behind me was standing like this with his arms crossed, right? And the guy's like, "What? No, I don't want to fight." He goes, "Well, you have your arms crossed. It means you're not listening to me. It means you have a problem with what I'm saying, which tells me you want to fight." I'm just like, woo. So every time I see that, that's what I think. You want to fight? So it's a perception thing. It's not, and that's the whole thing too, is like when you are having nonverbal cues with people, not everybody picks up the cue the same way. So it's important to know that things that you do could be sending the wrong message to people. If you're trying to interact with somebody, if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, get them to understand what you're saying to them, what you're saying might not be what they're hearing. So you have to make sure that you are careful with how you're projecting yourself. When we're instructors, we talk about one of the most important things we do is smile, because it loosens people up. It makes them feel comfortable. It makes them feel relaxed. It's just a way to lighten the mood of whatever it is that you're doing. And no matter what you're saying, if you're saying it with a smile, it seems that people are more receptive to it. Even if you're yelling at them, if they're in trouble, but you're smiling at them, it can be a lot more effective to get your message across.
And I vehemently agree with the arms crossed thing. It is one of those things where in all of the years of training, from every leader that I have been trained by, from Tony Robbins, Dale Carnegie, Jack Canfield, all of the books that I've read, that this is a closed off position. And what I think is a lot of people will use, well, I'm cold. Okay. Or I don't feel comfortable. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Then wrapping yourself up like this has that type of, think about it. If you are cold and you're wrapping yourself up, that's putting something between you and the other person. If you are feeling insecure, same type of thing. Therefore, for me, and what works very well is in a conversation, if you want to play strategically, and I will sit across sometimes people that do this, I will mimic them, cross my arms, and in the middle of the conversation, as I want to express something and build trust with them, I will open my arms and accentuate a possibility of the conversation with them. And then I leave my arms open. And as a sales rep, I have now demonstrated that ability to take off a particular layer and show vulnerability and express an opportunity to get close to my client or to my vendor. And for me, this whole building trust and connection is the number one opportunity for me. Whether or not I do business with them is secondary at that point. The opportunity to build trust, to build that connection is imperative. It's the continuation of the possibility of a relationship. If that doesn't happen, I may as well stop talking and leave. Their experience is going to be left with, this is just a talking head in my office. There's no heart behind the person. There's no connection. There's no opportunity for me to develop a relationship, a connection, trust, empathy, sympathy, any of it, due to the fact I'm closed off. And it sets up for the possibility of conflict right on the get-go. And that,
I said, you want to fight?
Exactly. And I was just going to say, that's what Mr. Yarwood was pointing to with his master that was walking around doing the training and pointing that out. That air of sometimes that air of arrogance, that air of ego, that impatient air, that air of, I don't really care what you're saying, and I'm looking forward to you ending your piece of the conversation. And, one of the people that's watching on YouTube right now just mentioned something really powerful. This is also relevant in healthcare, which he works in. You have to establish a trusting, deep bond with the patient, or you can't do the work. And that is so accurate, because they're going to be guarded with whatever they say to you. So that's a very good point. And for me, now as a coach, my opportunity is to have my client feel at ease. And in that ease, as I practice my listening skills, that person then shares things. Oftentimes they're like, wow, I can't believe I just shared that with you. And what it is, it's that nonverbal communication that has had their subconscious see the safety that's available in the connection and allow them to continue to share something that may be upsetting, distracting, frustrating, that they're working on, and allow me to make a difference.
Yeah, there's so many different like little subtle cues that get sent when you're speaking to somebody, when you're in a room hanging out with people, just little fidgets, little eye glances, just so many different little things that can send so many different messages. You and I are in a networking group, and one of the things they talk about in the networking group is when we're having conversations during networking, how you stand with the person that you're talking to tells you other people outside of that conversation, whether that's a open, welcome conversation, or if it's something between two people or three people, right? Like if we have three people standing in a group talking to each other and there's a space somewhere, that means they're open to have somebody come into that conversation. But if the three people are facing each other and there's no way to get in, that becomes more of a private conversation. Stepping into it becomes a little awkward or a little uncomfortable. So if you're seeing different things like that, those are telling you things without saying anything like verbally to you. You can kind of read what they say, read the room, right? You get a feel for what's going on. And it's important to understand that if you are at a networking thing or something like that, and you just come in and you don't pay attention to those little cues and you just kind of butt in, people will be like, they kind of get standoffish. And then all of a sudden, that's when they turn those arms up, right? Oh, what's this person doing here, right? So it's important to be able to pay attention to those things and kind of gather information about what people are saying without actually verbally saying things to you. And if you want to be effective in communicating with people, you have to know how to do that. You have to, we know how to physically read books and read magazines and read words. We also have to how to read what people are telling us that are standing in front of us or standing around us. We one of the things we teach too as instructors is to look at people in the eye when you're speaking to them. Also, if you have 10 people in your class, make sure you look at everybody along the way, because when you're looking at somebody and you're speaking to them, that makes them feel important to you, right? They feel like, okay, this person values me because they're actually paying attention to me, looking at me and speaking directly to me, versus talking at me because they're not looking. They're just glancing. I once had an instructor in college. She never once looked at anybody while she was teaching. She scanned across the top of the back of the room back and forth. Never. It was uncomfortable and awkward the entire time. And it was hard to learn because it took away from what she was trying to teach us. Because all we could do is she's just looking around. It was just very uncomfortable. And just one gesture created all kinds of other issues for people. So like I said, you just got to be wary of what you're doing, what you're saying with your body language, and understand that people are reading. They may not even realize it. You could be saying things to people, they don't realize what they're reading, but they're responding because it's like an unconscious response to what you're saying to them.
And you mentioned something that's very interesting. She was looking above everybody and scanning back and forth. That was one of the old speaking tricks that they used to use to have you get over your fear of speaking, was to look over the top of the heads of everybody. What they've now found in research, though, is that person is disconnected from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to see it. And so then people are, then scrutinize the emotional empathy of the person and then get lost in the outcome of that. Meaning, oh, look, they're scared. Oh, look, they're this. Oh, look, oh, bye. Oh, instead of paying attention to the material.
Yep.
So most definitely. And we have an ability with, and especially one of the things that I know we do as instructors, I'm working with kids or even just interacting with kids. When you walk up to a kid to get down on one knee, to get down to their level, to see eye to eye with them, creates that safety for that youngster, creates that space for you to interact at eye to eye. And when you hover and look down at somebody, there's that propensity for people to then have to look up and go, oh my goodness. And then, even if you're warm and fuzzy and friendly, they're still looking up at you with fear. The other thing that we spend a lot of time with in the instructor world, which is very, very important in the speech world, is pace and peak. Do we keep a tone that's all monotone and go a certain speed so that people can understand, and we know that it's possible to keep that same tone and keep everything going at a certain rate, like there's a metronome in the back going peck, 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 which causes people to yawn and get disinterested, literally like a sleep potion.
Yep.
The way to break that up is to bring some dynamics into the conversation, some body into the conversation. Tone, timbre, speed are all nonverbal cues.
Even though they're technically verbal because you're saying stuff, it's how you're saying it is the cue, right?
Is the cue, exactly. And when somebody gets up there and starts talking really fast and it's like, okay, are they looking to just vomit information out of their mouth to make sure it's been spoken? Or are they interested in us actually capturing that information and being able to use that information? In some ways, that pausing, and I think, and now that I just said that, silence as a speaker is the most powerful tool you have. And the number of times I've had this conversation with people, they're like, oh, no, it's not at all. It is. When you're
think about an awkward pause, right? That's one of my favorite things, is to just stop talking completely and don't say a word. Because to me, it doesn't bother me at all. It's fun. Other people are like, they feel this need to have to say something, right? And it's like it's a sales tactic too. First person to talk loses. Right? So I practiced that when I used to do real estate a long time ago, and I practiced it, and it worked because people want to fill silence. They don't like the awkwardness of it. And to me, the more awkward, the better. Push it. I actually, it's kind of talking about that. I once taught, it was probably, it had to be 6-7 years ago now. We were actually talking about communication as one of our life skills in class, and I taught an entire class without saying anything verbally. 30-minute class and didn't say a word. And some of the kids were like, at first they're like, what's going on, right? And eventually they figured out what I was doing. We got through the entire 30 minutes without me having to say one single word. And it was challenging for me too, because there's times where you feel you have to explain something, but I was like, nope, I'm just going to do it. See what happens. And, 30 minutes of absolute silence from the instructor. It was hard though. It was definitely a challenge because I like to talk.
I know somebody else like that. I think the key though with all of this, and even with pace, how fast do I speak? How slow do I speak? Do I speak loud or do I whisper? The dance that you can create in the speaking that is all part of that nonverbal piece of a communication is the piece that hooks people. And as you said, one of the things that does that, when you stop talking in front of a room as you're speaking or creating something and you suddenly stop talking, what happens is the people that were looking at their cell phones or staring at a book or staring at a computer stop and look up to find out, one, what are they missing? Or two, how do I get more of that? So with that whole expressiveness by being silent is super powerful. The other is expressions like nodding in agreement with somebody or shaking your head. What is absolutely hilarious is watching people do this. Yes, Mr. Yarwood. Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. Yes, Mr. Yarwood. And they're blatantly lying.
No, you're not. You're not lying.
And for those of you listening, for those of you that are reviewing this or looking at this, do me a favor and have somebody ask you a yes or no question and do the opposite with your head as what you're saying as a yes. And you'll see it's very interesting. If you're shaking your head no, and then suddenly you want to change an answer and say yes to something, you'll see your chin will dip down and you'll almost do a circle until you catch yourself.
It's something that FBI uses, body language experts use when they watch politicians or they watch whatever. The politician is saying something, but subconsciously, like they're making you a promise at the same time that they're shaking their head or their eyes look a certain direction, right? There's just certain little cues that tell you they're not speaking the truth to you. So it's we as humans, even though we're not trained to read nonverbal communication, we still do. You know, it might not be specific. Like we couldn't sit and say, what did this verbal cue tell you or this nonverbal cue tell you? I don't know, but you sensed it, right? There's just something about what was going on that made you either believe them or not believe them or have a response in kind to what was that they said, even though they didn't verbally say anything. Like if somebody, you know, you're walking towards somebody in the hallway, and there's two different ways to acknowledge them without saying anything with your head. You can either nod down or nod up. So like when you nod up, say "What's up," right? Or if you nod down, it's a show of a sign of respect to them, right? That little difference says a whole lot in what you're expressing to that person. Another thing that we do in as instructors, and it's nonverbal, but it's a little bit more involved, is touching. Like you give somebody a high five or some knuckles or a pat on the back or whatever that is. Those are nonverbal things that are things that are send a message as well. To us, it's very important to acknowledge that with our students, giving them a high five. Little kids love high fives. They love knuckles. It's huge for them. And if you go to give a kid a high five and then you pull it away, oh man, now they want it even more, right? Like, no way, Mr. Yarwood, I want a high five, right? And or if one other kid gets a high five and they don't,
oh, that's wait a
sends
minute.
a huge message to them without saying a word. Like, you didn't like me enough to give me a high five.
Or did I do something wrong?
Yep.
How come I didn't?
Why did you ignore me?
Oh, yeah. And this is the most important thing as a coach, as a teacher, as an instructor, as a professor, any of these things, as a manager, is the impact that is left over there without it then leaves the person that you're interacting with to their own devices in their brain, which are powered and fueled by the past.
Mm-hmm.
And the past is a very dangerous place. It is the place where interpretation, misinterpretation,
more likely misinterpretation, yes,
misunderstandings, misguided, all of those things happen in that background. So for that reason, it's imperative for us to be managing as a leader, be managing the impact of our actions, being in another person's world, experiencing what it's like to be on the recipient's edge.
One game or drill that we do instructor class is mimicking. So the instructor that's leading, they're doing all their hand gestures and all that stuff, and everybody in the class is doing exactly the same thing as them. But we don't tell them that's what we're doing, right? They start to go, what the heck is going on? Why are people doing that, right? Your hands, exactly the same, your eyes, your face, everything. And they're just like, they're looking around like, what the heck is going on, right? It starts to send a message to them that these are the things that you're doing that you don't even probably realize you're doing. When you're having a conversation, when you're speaking in front of people, when whatever, you're doing things you probably don't even realize you're doing. And it all comes from internally. It's sending messages non-verbally to other people about who you are, what you're thinking, what you're doing, all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting thing to watch when it happens, because people, the instructor who's teaching is going, they're looking around like, what the heck is going on? They don't realize it at first. Then what's fun is when they realize it and they do something on purpose and everybody else does it. Then they go, now I know what's going on.
So remember, a very important thing to remember, nonverbal communication bridges gaps where words fail, offering a level of authenticity and depth to interactions. Mastery of nonverbal cues enriches personal relationships and enhances professional success. So next week, we're going to be talking about verbal communication. So we're going to then wrap the two of them together. And in the meantime, practice some of this. Fold your arms, see what happens. Unfold them in the middle of a conversation. Create eye contact. Don't have eye contact. Look to the side. Then bring it back. Experience this.
Film yourself doing, like, if you are a teacher or instructor, film yourself and see what cues you send or don't send to people.
It's awesome. So, Mr. Yarwood, thank you so much. Thank you for today. I appreciate it. And for those of you, Brother Safe and Dragon Eater, from both of you from YouTube, thank you for sharing in the messages in the chat online today. And we'll look forward to coming together next week to create the same amazing opportunity with communication on the verbal side.
See you on the mats.